The battlefield was a graveyard of shattered armor and smoldering wreckage, the air thick with the acrid scent of burning metal and ozone. Sporadic gunfire echoed in the distance, and the faint tremors of explosions rippled through the ground, a reminder that danger still lingered nearby. High above, the remnants of orbital strikes still glittered like dying stars, their faint glow accompanied by the occasional crackle of dissipating energy. The lingering heat from the blasts warped the air, adding a shimmering haze to the scene. On the ground, amidst the chaos of retreating soldiers and the groans of the wounded, Sergeant Daniel Hayes noticed the movement, subtle, almost imperceptible. His breath hitched as his eyes narrowed, instinct sharpening. Was it a trick of the smoke-choked air? Or something alive in the debris? A surge of adrenaline coursed through him as his grip tightened on his weapon, every muscle ready for what might come next. It came from the pile of debris that had once been an Arcanog battle tank, now reduced to twisted scrap by coalition fire. A flicker of motion caught his eye. Instinct overrode protocol and he advanced cautiously, weapon raised. As he approached, his boots crunching over shattered plating, the source of the movement became clear. An alien warrior, slumped against the wreckage, barely clinging to life. The warrior's chitinous exoskeleton was cracked and seeping a dark, viscous fluid. Its 4 arms, each built for the brutal precision of Arcanog combat, were now limp and twisted unnaturally. One of its mandibles was broken, hanging at an awkward angle. It was paralyzed from the waist down, trapped and vulnerable in a battlefield where mercy was a scarce commodity. Hayes lowered his weapon slightly, his breath catching as the warrior's compound eyes locked onto his. There was no malice in the alien's gaze, only a faint, defiant flicker of life. A voice crackled in his earpiece, the clipped tone of his commanding officer breaking through his focus. "Sergeant Hayes, report. Why have you left your position?" "Sir," Hayes replied, keeping his voice steady, "I've got a live Arcanog here. They're injured." A beat of silence. Then the response came sharp and final. "Leave it. We're pulling back. That thing isn't our problem." Hayes hesitated, his grip tightening on his rifle. He glanced back toward the coalition line, where transports were loading the wounded and departing rapidly. Time was running out. He looked at the alien again, noting the shallow rise and fall of its chest, a clear indication it was still breathing, still alive. "Sir, it's not hostile," Hayes argued, his voice steady but laced with a quiet defiance. His jaw tightened as he spoke, his eyes fixed on the struggling alien. "I can't just leave it here to die." "That's an order, Sergeant," his commander snapped. "We don't have the resources to babysit an enemy combatant. Fall back now." The comm line went dead, but Hayes didn't move. He crouched beside the Arcanog, his mind racing. Everything about this situation was wrong. Protocol dictated he should leave the alien, that saving it was a risk the coalition couldn't afford. But protocol didn't account for the look in those eyes, the faint glimmer of dignity even in defeat. "You understand me?" Hayes asked softly, unsure if the alien could comprehend his words. The Arcanog's mandibles twitched slightly, and its gaze shifted toward him, confirming some level of awareness. Hayes slung his rifle over his shoulder, feeling the strain already building in his muscles. "All right, big guy," he muttered, leaning down and wrapping his arms under the alien's torso. Its body was rigid and unnaturally heavy, the cracked exoskeleton digging into his palms. The alien emitted a faint, low-pitched hum, almost like a groan of pain. Hayes gritted his teeth and hoisted it higher. "Let's get you out of here." Using every ounce of strength he had, Hayes began to lift the alien. Its body was heavier than he anticipated, its armor and natural exoskeleton adding to the burden. The creature let out a faint, low-pitched hum, a sound that might have been a groan of pain or an attempt at communication. As Hayes hauled the warrior toward the coalition line, whispers of unease and disapproval spread among the soldiers. Some glanced at him with open disdain, others with a mix of confusion and disbelief. "Hayes, what the hell are you doing?" one soldier demanded as he passed. "Trying something different," Hayes grunted in reply. "You should try it sometime." By the time they reached the triage zone, the coalition medics were overwhelmed. The sight of Hayes dragging the injured alien through the perimeter caused an uproar. "Are you insane?" one of the medics snapped, stepping forward to block his path. "We're stretched thin as it is and you bring us an Arcanog? Get that thing out of here before it's a problem." Hayes set the alien down carefully, ignoring the protests around him. "It's not a problem. It's a survivor," he said firmly. "And if we're supposed to be better than them, then this is where it starts." The medic hesitated, glancing between Hayes and the alien. His brows furrowed, a mix of frustration and doubt flashing across his face. The silence stretched, his hand hovering uncertainly over his comm device as if debating whether to call for reinforcements or to trust Hayes. Finally, with a reluctant nod and a sharp exhale, he stepped aside. Fine. But it's on you if this goes south. Hayes watched as the alien was moved onto a stretcher, its body barely responding to the medic's touch. The faint hum it had emitted earlier grew softer, almost imperceptible, as if it were fading. Stay with me, Hayes muttered, his voice low. He didn't know if the alien could hear him, but he hoped the intent carried through. In the days that followed, the alien's presence became a point of contention among the coalition forces. Whispers circulated through the ranks, stories of how Sergeant Hayes had defied orders to save a paralyzed enemy. Some called him reckless. Others quietly admired his courage. But for Hayes, it wasn't about admiration. It was about proving that even in the darkest moments, humanity had a choice, to be something more than survivalists. To choose compassion over pragmatism, even when it was the harder path. And as the alien's compound eyes flickered open for the first time since the battlefield, Hayes knew he had made the right choice. A faint, deliberate hum emanated from the alien, its gaze locking onto him with a clarity that hinted at something more than gratitude, perhaps a determination that the choice Hayes had made would soon matter far beyond this moment. The tension surrounding the Arcanok warrior only deepened in the days that followed, a palpable unease rippling through the camp. It became the topic of hushed debates, not just among the soldiers but also within the higher ranks of coalition leadership. The camp's atmosphere felt charged, every glance at the alien laden with mistrust, curiosity, or disdain. Sergeant Hayes remained steadfast. He took it upon himself to check on the alien regularly. The creature, now stabilized, lay in a makeshift containment area, monitored by medics who treated it with the bare minimum of effort required to keep it alive. Its exoskeleton had been patched in places, but the damage to its lower body seemed irreparable. One evening, as the sun dipped below the jagged horizon, Hayes entered the containment area. The alien's compound eyes tracked him immediately, and it emitted a faint clicking sound, softer than the hums from before. Hayes crouched beside it, his voice low, his eyes scanning the patched exoskeleton for signs of improvement. "You're looking better," he said, unsure if it understood. "Not 100%, but better." The alien clicked again, its mandibles twitching faintly. Hayes tilted his head, intrigued. "That a yes?" he asked, half joking. To his surprise, the clicking grew slightly louder, and the alien's gaze seemed to sharpen. For a moment, he thought he saw something resembling amusement in its otherwise alien features. Behind him, the containment tent's flap rustled, drawing Hayes's attention. Captain Evers entered, his stern face shadowed by the dim light, his scowl as sharp as the edge of a blade. His presence instantly shifted the atmosphere. "Hayes," Evers began, his tone clipped. "A word." Hayes rose, his posture stiffening. "Sir." Evers gestured for Hayes to follow him outside. Once they were clear of the tent, the captain's expression darkened further. "You've stirred up quite the mess," he said. "Command isn't happy. They think you've jeopardized operational security by bringing that thing here." "With respect, sir, it's not a thing," Hayes replied, his voice calm but firm. "It's a sentient being. And it's alive because I made a call when no one else would." Evers' scowl deepened. "You're a soldier, Hayes. Your job is to follow orders, not play savior to enemy combatants. What happens if that creature's comrades come looking for it? Or worse, if it decides to turn on us the moment it recovers? If they come looking, maybe they'll think twice about attacking because we showed mercy," Hayes countered. "And as for it turning on us? It had every chance back on the battlefield. It didn't. That should count for something." For a moment, the two men locked eyes, the weight of their opposing convictions hanging heavy in the charged air. Finally, Evers sighed, his shoulders sagging slightly. "Command's giving me heat over this, but I'll keep it off your back for now. Just don't make me regret it." "Understood, sir." "And, thank you," Hayes said, his voice sincere. Evers waved him off. "Don't thank me. Just be ready for the fallout." The fallout came sooner than Hayes expected. 2 nights later, the camp's perimeter alarms blared. Soldiers scrambled to their positions, weapons at the ready. The sharp beams of searchlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the barren landscape beyond the camp's defensive walls. "What are we dealing with?" Hayes asked as he joined a group of soldiers near the command post. "Unknown contacts, closing in fast," a young private replied, his voice trembling. "Could be Arcanok reinforcements?" Hayes' stomach sank. He turned toward the containment area where the alien warrior was still recovering. If this was a rescue mission, things were about to get complicated. Captain Evers appeared, barking orders to the troops. "Hold the line. We don't fire unless fired upon. And someone get me a comm link with HQ? Moments later, the source of the disturbance came into view. A group of figures emerged from the shadows, their silhouettes unmistakably Arcanok. Unlike the wounded warrior in the tent, these newcomers were fully armed, their sleek forms glinting under the searchlights. The coalition soldiers tensed, their weapons trained on the approaching group. Hayes stepped forward, his heart pounding. "Hold your fire," he shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. He turned to Evers. "Let me talk to them." "Are you insane?" Evers snapped. "They're armed to the teeth. If they opened fire, if they wanted to attack, they would have done it already," Hayes reasoned. "Let me try." Evers hesitated, then gave a reluctant nod. "You've got 2 minutes? If they make one wrong move, we light them up." With a steadying breath, Hayes approached the perimeter, his hands raised high to show he was unarmed, his heart pounding with the rhythm of distant alarms. The Arcanok warriors halted a few meters away, their antennae twitching as they studied him. One of them stepped forward, larger than the rest, its exoskeleton marked with intricate patterns that suggested a position of authority. Hayes began searching for the right words. He gestured toward the containment area. "Your comrade is alive. I saved them." The lead Arcanok tilted its head, its intricate markings catching the searchlight as it emitted a series of sharp, deliberate clicks and hums, the sounds carrying a tone that seemed almost inquisitive. Hayes held his ground, hoping his tone conveyed sincerity even if the words didn't translate perfectly. "We didn't hurt them," Hayes continued. "They're safe. If you want, I can take you to them." Another pause. Then the lead Arcanok stepped forward again, lowering its weapon slightly. The tension in the air eased just enough for Hayes to exhale. "Follow me," he said, gesturing for the group to wait while he signaled to the coalition soldiers to stand down. Slowly, he led the Arcanok delegation toward the containment tent, every step heavy with the weight of what this encounter could mean. The containment tent felt impossibly small as the Arcanok delegation entered, their towering forms dominating the space. The rustle of their armor and the soft thud of their footsteps added a weight to the already charged atmosphere. The lead Arcanok's compound eyes scanned the tent's interior, their multifaceted surfaces glinting faintly under the overhead light. There was an intensity to its gaze, a mix of urgency and concern, as it locked onto the wounded warrior lying on the makeshift medical bed. A series of rapid clicks and hums filled the air, their tone unmistakably urgent. Hayes stepped aside, letting the delegation approach. The wounded warrior stirred weakly, its mandibles twitching at the sound of its kin. The lead Arcanok moved closer, lowering its weapon fully. It extended a clawed appendage toward the injured soldier, resting it gently on the warrior's shoulder. The interaction was surprisingly tender, a sharp contrast to their intimidating presence. Hayes watched in silence, his pulse still racing. Behind him, Captain Evers entered, flanked by 2 armed soldiers. Evers' expression was as hard as ever, but his posture betrayed a hint of unease. "They're not making any moves," Hayes murmured, glancing over his shoulder. "I think we're okay." Evers' gaze flicked between Hayes and the aliens. "For now. But this doesn't mean they're not assessing our weaknesses." The lead Arcanok straightened, turning its attention to Hayes. It emitted a slow, deliberate hum, followed by clicks that seemed less urgent than before. Hayes held his ground, his heart hammering as he tried to interpret the alien's intent. "What's it saying?" Evers asked, his hand resting uneasily on the holster of his sidearm. "I don't know," Hayes admitted. "But it doesn't feel hostile." The lead Arcanok pointed to the injured warrior, then back to Hayes. Its gestures were deliberate, almost calculated, as though it were piecing together a message. Hayes nodded slowly, hoping to convey understanding. I think it knows I saved them," Hayes said, his voice low. Evers let out a skeptical huff. "That or it's deciding if we're worth sparing." Ignoring the comment, Hayes stepped closer to the lead Arcanok, his hands open and palms facing outward. His heart pounded in his chest, a mix of fear and determination driving him forward. What if he misread their intentions? What if this was a mistake? But as he met the alien's gaze, a quiet resolve settled over him. This was a chance to bridge a divide, however slim the odds. "We're not your enemies," he said softly, unsure if the alien understood. "I saved your comrade because it was the right thing to do. That's all." The Arcanok leader tilted its head, clicking softly. Then, in a moment that left everyone in the room frozen, it reached down and unclasped a small device from its forearm. The object glowed faintly, its surface smooth and reflective. The leader extended the device toward Hayes, offering it with an air of solemnity. Hayes hesitated, glancing at Evers, who gave him a curt shake of the head. But something in the alien's gesture, a strange mix of respect and urgency, compelled him to accept. He reached out slowly, his fingers brushing against the cool surface of the device as he took it. "What is this?" Hayes asked, examining the object. It pulsed faintly in his hand, almost as if it were alive. The lead Archonok stepped back and let out a series of clicks and hums, gesturing toward the device and then toward the injured warrior. Hayes frowned, trying to decipher the meaning. The alien leader repeated the gestures, more urgently this time. "They want you to use it," one of the medics whispered from the corner of the tent. "On their comrade?" Hayes looked at the device again. It felt strange in his hand, humming softly as though attuned to something he couldn't understand. He glanced at Evers, whose jaw tightened. "We don't know what that thing does," Evers said, his voice a low growl. "For all we know, it's a weapon." "I don't think it is," Hayes replied, his gaze returning to the injured warrior. "If they wanted to hurt us, they wouldn't be standing here asking for help." Before Evers could object further, Hayes knelt beside the injured Archonok. He held the device above its chest, hesitating for a moment as doubt crept in. Then, taking a deep breath, he pressed the device against the alien's cracked exoskeleton. A soft light emanated from the object, spreading across the warrior's body in intricate, glowing patterns. A faint hum accompanied the glow, and Hayes felt a subtle warmth radiating from the device, as though it pulsed with life. The room fell silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Hayes watched in awe as the light seemed to repair the damaged exoskeleton, sealing cracks and restoring its structure. The alien's labored breathing grew steadier, its mandibles twitching as its eyes flickered open. The lead Archonok emitted a low, resonant hum, its tone unmistakably one of relief. The other Archonok warriors clicked softly among themselves, their postures relaxing for the first time since entering the camp. "Well, I'll be damned," Evers muttered, his expression a mixture of disbelief and grudging respect. Hayes stepped back, his hands still trembling slightly. The injured warrior slowly sat up, its movements tentative but deliberate. It turned its gaze to Hayes, and for a moment, the two shared a silent understanding, an unspoken gratitude that transcended language. The lead Archonok stepped forward, placing a clawed appendage on Hayes's shoulder. Its touch was surprisingly gentle. It clicked and hummed softly, the tone almost melodic. Hayes nodded, not needing words to understand the gesture. "You've got guts, Sergeant," Evers said finally, his tone grudging but sincere. "Let's hope it pays off." Hayes didn't respond. His attention remained on the Archonok delegation as they prepared to leave, the healed warrior now able to stand with their support. The lead Archonok paused at the tent's exit, turning back to look at Hayes one last time. It raised a claw in what might have been a salute before stepping into the night. The tent fell silent once more, the weight of the moment sinking in. Hayes exhaled deeply, his mind racing with the implications of what had just transpired. "What now?" one of the medics asked, breaking the silence. Hayes glanced down at the strange device still in his hand, its faint glow now dormant. His mind raced with questions. What was its purpose? Why had they entrusted it to him? A mix of curiosity and unease settled over him, the weight of its significance pressing heavily on his thoughts. He didn't have an answer, but he knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. The departure of the Archonok delegation left a heavy silence in the camp. Hayes couldn't help but reflect on the enormity of what had transpired. This was more than a fleeting act of mercy. It was a ripple that could alter the course of humanity's future. What kind of alliance or conflict had they just set into motion? Soldiers whispered in hushed tones, their uneasy glances following Hayes as he walked back to his quarters, the alien device still clasped in his hand. He couldn't shake the feeling that it was more than just a tool. It felt alive in a way he couldn't quite explain. Captain Evers approached him later that night, his expression unreadable, though the slight furrow in his brow and the tension in his jaw betrayed the inner conflict brewing beneath his stoic exterior. "HQ wants a full report," he said, his voice low. "They're not happy about this, Hayes. But they're curious too. That thing you're holding might be the key to understanding the Archonok." Hayes nodded, his thoughts still spinning. "Do they think this changes anything?" Evers sighed, leaning against the doorway. "They're not sure. But I'll tell you this, you've put us in uncharted territory. For better or worse, you've started something we can't take back." The next morning, the camp's comm system crackled to life, summoning all personnel to the command center. Hayes arrived to find the room buzzing with activity. A holographic display of the surrounding sector flickered in the center, showing a new formation of Archonok ships just outside Coalition territory. Their holding position, a tactical officer reported. No signs of aggression, but they've sent a transmission. It's encrypted? Evers frowned. And we can't decode it? Not yet, sir. But there's something else. The transmission came with coordinates? Hayes' stomach tightened. Coordinates? For what? The officer hesitated. An uncharted region on the edge of the Helios cluster. We've cross-referenced it with our maps and there's nothing there. At least, nothing we've ever documented. Evers turned to Hayes, his expression grim. Looks like you're part of this now, Sergeant. Pack your gear. You're leading the team. The journey to the coordinates was tense. Hayes, accompanied by a small squad and a coalition scientist named Dr. Ilara Voss, spent hours poring over theories about what awaited them. Voss, a specialist in xenotechnology, was particularly fascinated by the device Hayes carried. It's more than a medical tool, she said, examining its dormant surface. It's adaptive, responsive. It's designed to interface with more than just biology, it's a key to something larger. Hayes stared at the device, its faint glow barely visible. A key to what? Voss shook her head. That's what we're going to find out. When they arrived at the coordinates, the squad found themselves in a region of space that seemed almost unnatural. A massive, ancient structure loomed before them, its surface a patchwork of dark metal and glowing conduits. It dwarfed their ship, its scale beyond comprehension. What the hell is that? One of the soldiers muttered, his voice tinged with awe and fear. Arcanok tech, Voss whispered, her eyes wide. But this is beyond anything we've seen. It's a relic. A monument. Hayes felt a strange pull toward the structure, an almost magnetic connection that seemed to resonate deep within him. The device in his hand vibrated faintly, its glow pulsing in rhythm with the flickering conduits on the structure's surface, as though it were alive and yearning to reunite with something long lost. We're going in, he said, his voice steady despite the unease curling in his gut. Inside, the structure was a labyrinth of corridors, each more alien than the last. The walls pulsed faintly as though alive, and the air was thick with an unplaceable energy. Voss's scanner beeped incessantly, its readings fluctuating wildly. This place is active, she murmured. It's waiting for something. As they ventured deeper, the device in Hayes' hand began to glow more brightly, its hum resonating with the structure. Finally, they reached a central chamber, dominated by a massive console covered in alien glyphs. The device pulsed insistently in Hayes' grip. It's reacting, Voss said, her voice trembling. I think it's meant to interface with this. Hayes approached the console, his heart hammering. He placed the device onto a recessed platform that seemed designed for it. The chamber came alive instantly, the walls lighting up with cascading patterns of energy. A deep, resonant hum filled the air, vibrating through their very bones. A holographic projection burst to life, depicting the galaxy in breathtaking detail. Swirling nebulae glowed with vibrant colors, their edges fading into the inky blackness of space. Thousands of stars shimmered like scattered diamonds, each one marked with intricate data streams that cascaded around the display. The immensity of the galaxy seemed almost overwhelming, a reminder of just how small they were in the grand scheme of the universe. Stars and planets swirled in intricate detail, but at the center was a cluster marked with a glowing Arcanok sigil. A voice, alien and layered, echoed through the chamber. What's it saying? A soldier asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Voss's eyes widened as the console's glyphs shifted into recognizable patterns. It's a warning, she said. A message for us. The projection shifted, highlighting a dark void creeping across the map, consuming stars as it expanded. The voice spoke again, its tone urgent. It's a threat, Voss translated. Something's coming. Something the Arcanok feared enough to build this. Hayes stared at the projection, his mind racing. The device, the wounded warrior, the delegation, it had all led to this. They didn't just come here for their comrade, he said softly. They came to warn us. Evers's voice crackled over the comms. Hayes, report. What the hell is going on in there? Hayes took a deep breath, his gaze fixed on the dark void spreading across the map. We've got a bigger problem, sir. And I think we're going to need the Arcanok's help to stop it. The chamber fell silent, the weight of their discovery sinking in. The team stood motionless, their faces a mixture of awe and fear. One soldier tightened his grip on his weapon, while another glanced nervously at the swirling projection. Voss's eyes reflected the glowing galaxy, her expression caught between fascination and dread. Hayes exhaled slowly, the enormity of the situation pressing heavily on his chest, as the implications of their shared fate with the Arcanok became undeniably clear. For the first time, humanity and the Arcanauts stood on the same side of an unfathomable conflict, their survival intertwined. Hayes couldn't help but feel that this was just the beginning of something far greater than anyone could have anticipated.